In this video, we're going to show you my Lizardman army of the old ones. This was created for Warhammer 5th edition back in the mid-1990s. I've got some great memories from building this army, so let's look at each unit in a little bit more detail. The Lizardman army was usually led by the Slann, and these were level 3 or 4 wizards and the most powerful in Warhammer 5th edition. I decided to scratch build some palanquins for my Slann so they didn't all look the same. That first one is based on the Mayan calendar. This is the official Games Workshop Slann, and this one is based on a kind of a shrine or a sedan chair. Gave my army a little bit of individuality. The Temple Guard usually formed up around each of the Slann. In this case, I've put them to one side just to show the army off. What you might notice is that the second rank are not real Temple Guard models. Well, these guys were expensive, so I proxied them with the plastic figures. In addition, I painted them a different colour to the rest of my Saurus regiments to differentiate them. The core of the army is made up with my 3 decent-sized Saurus units. These were reasonably cheap to put together in terms of money, and in terms of points value, I really rate these troops. They have a thing called cold-blooded, which gives some really good leadership tests. It means that when they need to take a morale check, they roll 3d6 instead of 2d6, and you take the 2 dice that you prefer out of the pool of 3, giving you a better chance of success. If you've seen any of my other videos, you'll know how much I enjoy scratch building. Take a look at this banner. This isn't a standard Games Workshop banner. This is a scratch built one made from mounting card and painted up. And take a look at this command team. This is another scratch built banner, and in this case the musician is using a drum that I've made from milliput or green stuff. Again, increasing the individuality of each unit and saving me a little bit of money to spend on other models. Supporting that core of Saurus units are these Skinks. I had plenty of these. They were cheap to buy in terms of point values, and I know they were very effective on the table. It used to frustrate my opponents because there were just so many of them for so few points. They couldn't understand how that worked. Another thing that was really useful about Skinks was that they didn't get movement penalties for moving through water. So if you were playing near rivers or swamps, these guys could move as if they weren't there, and this really foxed the opponents. So I've got some of the Games Workshop command figures, as you can see in that shot there. But here in the foreground, we can see one of my scratch-built banners. And I think this scratch-built banner for my Skinks must be my favourite. I only had 2 real Kroxigor models. I didn't find these very effective in battles, so I didn't pursue this as a regiment. You can see there's an additional Dungeons & Dragons Lizardman figure posing as a Kroxigor here to bulk the regiment out. So instead of things like Kroxigors, I wanted something more dynamic that suited my playstyle. So I got this great squadron of Terradons. These were interesting when I started using them in 2s and 3s, but when we started using them at this scale, it really frustrated the opponents. Not as fast as the Terradons, but arguably even more effective were these Stegadons. I really couldn't afford to buy all of them as Games Workshop kits, so I went to the toy shop, bought some dinosaurs, scratch built my howdahs and my standards, and used my plastic sprues of Skinks to fill them up with crews. It meant my army was quite individual and quite different to everybody else's. I had a lot of fun building these. The army had some great specialist units. So these are old Games Workshop Lizardmen figures from a long time ago, maybe 2nd edition. And what I've done here is I've painted them up like chameleon Skinks. These worked like scouts, and you could deploy out of sight of the enemy at the start of the battle. And this skink with the blowpipe is Oxalotl, the hero skink of that particular type. He could be used as an individual character. I didn't have much in the way of traditional cavalry in this army, but this is Incy Wincy riding his horned one, with his regiment of Skinks riding cold ones. I didn't quite have enough of these to be effective, but they were still a problem for my opponents. When building a Lizardman army, you could have as many salamanders as you had regiments of Saurus or Skinks. I proxied some of mine from dinosaurs from the toy shop. This one in the centre, well, this is a real Games Workshop one, but they were expensive and not overly effective, so I decided not to get too many of these. I'm not sure if these two models at the side are actually Ralpatha or Dungeons and Dragons models of some sort that I've used. The swarms moved slow, which didn't suit my dynamic play, but they were good for tying down units. This is the official Games Workshop lizard swarm. And over here, these are my snake swarms that I made out of milliput and painted up to look like the rest of the army. I found early on that having 1 or 2 swarms was really a waste of points. If you put 7 or 8 on the table, well, then that causes the opponents a few problems. The last special unit I want to show you is this coatl. Rules for this were released in White Dwarf magazine. It was a level 4 mage, it could fly, it was really useful on the battlefield, and this model is actually a 2nd edition Warhammer coatl. So when 5th edition was released, the rules came as a boxed set. We had Bretonnian sprues and Lizardman sprues. I seem to remember you took the Bretonnian sprues and I took the Lizardman sprues.
Yep.
And we had a number of friends who also got the rule set at the same time, and none of them wanted to build a Lizardman army. So I was able to get the troops from them as well and build the core of what became a really decent sized 5th edition Lizardman army.
Yep, that's right. That's right. In fact, I remember you bought that box set for Christmas in the early 90s. There you go.
So I started playing Warhammer on probably the 2nd or 3rd edition. And in those 2nd edition and 3rd edition rules, I remember there being a section on Lizardmen, but no one ever had a Lizardman army. I remember a few of us had the odd figure. I think I've got a slave figure somewhere because the original 2nd and 3rd edition Lizardmen armies had human slaves. But I never saw an army fielded. And then when 5th edition came out with that box set, it was the opportunity to really bring this army to life. And the one thing that captured me about the Slann was back in 1987, Games Workshop released a flexidisc, and it was in a White Dwarf magazine, and it was by a band called Sabbath, and it was all about blood for the blood god. It was all about chaos. But I seem to remember that the song starts with the words, "Once the mighty cities, now crumbled and turned to sand. Here dwelt the old Slann." Something like that, wasn't it?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this concept of the Slann was in my mind all this time. And I was like, I really want to see this come to life. So that 5th edition set meant I could do it. I could do it at last.
Absolutely. So, is this all of the army?
Well, actually, there's a few more bits and pieces that I've managed to get hold of since 5th edition came out. This great Saurus on Carnosaur model, and then some Temple Guard, which quite kindly you got me for Christmas a couple of years ago. They still need painting, but sooner or later we're going to see them on the table.
Can you tell me why this army is glossy or shiny compared to others?
When I painted this army, I wanted to do something a little bit different. So rather than travel down the normal route, I picked primary colours. They were quite bright. Then I used Tamiya smoke all over each model. It worked like a wash and like a glaze and a varnish at the same time. It meant there was no need for a top coat of matte. It makes the army look completely different to any other army, like they've got scales, like they glisten in the light. To help the albino heroes stand out, I painted them white and then used a blue Winsor & Newton ink wash and then a gloss varnish. This helped the champions and the heroes really stand out from the rest of the army. Back when I painted these, we didn't have the shade, contrast and washes that you see now in the Games Workshop range. We just had Games Workshop colours, Tamiya colours, Winsor & Newton ink.
Well, thank you very much for sharing with us your Lizardman host. It's been fantastic to see it out and arrayed.
Well, thanks very much for watching and showing an interest. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. And if you've got any questions, please pop them in the comments below.